Discipline was the true weapon of the Roman army, not the sword, not the shield, not the towering formations that terrified entire nations. Those were only tools. The real strength of Rome came from men who trained themselves to obey, endure, and remain unshaken even when fear crept into their hearts. Long before a Roman soldier ever stepped onto a battlefield, he was shaped by repetition, hardship, and sacrifice. Every movement had to become instinct. Every command had to be followed without hesitation, because in war, hesitation could destroy an entire army in seconds. A Roman recruit quickly learned that the army did not care about excuses. It did not matter if the weather was brutal, if exhaustion burned through his muscles, or if his feet bled after endless marching. The training continued. Day after day, soldiers carried heavy packs across miles of rough terrain under the scorching heat of the sun. They built camps with their own hands before resting at night. They woke before dawn and repeated the same routines again and again until discipline became part of who they were. Rome understood something powerful. Men are not born strong. They become strong through consistency. The discipline of a Roman soldier reached far beyond combat. Even the smallest details mattered. Armor had to be cleaned. Weapons had to remain sharp. Formations had to stay perfect. One careless mistake from a single man could place hundreds of lives in danger. That is why Roman commanders demanded order in everything. They knew chaos begins with small acts of neglect. A loose formation, a delayed reaction, or a lack of focus could turn victory into disaster. Discipline was not just about following rules. It was about building trust between every soldier standing shoulder to shoulder in the line. What made Roman discipline extraordinary was the fact that these soldiers were ordinary human beings. They felt fear before battle. They missed their families. They suffered pain, hunger, and exhaustion like any other person. Yet they continued to march forward because they were trained to place duty above comfort. They understood that emotions could not control their actions. In moments where panic could spread like fire, discipline kept them steady. It allowed them to think clearly while chaos surrounded them. That inner control became more valuable than physical strength. Many armies throughout history relied on passion and emotion to inspire their warriors. Rome relied on structure. A Roman soldier did not wake up each day waiting to feel motivated. He acted because discipline demanded action. He trained whether he felt ready or not. He marched whether he felt tired or not. He stood in formation whether fear consumed him or not. That mindset transformed average men into one of the greatest fighting forces the world had ever seen. They understood that motivation fades quickly, but habits built through discipline can last a lifetime. On the battlefield, discipline became the difference between survival and destruction. When arrows darkened the sky and enemy warriors charged screaming toward them, Roman soldiers could not afford panic. Every shield had to lock into place at the exact moment. Every line had to move together like a single machine. One man breaking formation could create weakness for the enemy to exploit, but discipline held the line together. Even under unbearable pressure, soldiers trusted their training more than their fear. That trust gave Rome an advantage over enemies who relied only on raw aggression. The Roman army also understood that discipline begins in the mind before it ever appears in action. Soldiers were constantly pushed beyond what they believed they could endure. Endless drills, harsh punishments, and brutal routines were designed to strengthen mental resilience. Rome wanted soldiers who could remain calm when surrounded by confusion and death. Over time, these hardships created warriors who no longer feared discomfort. Pain became familiar. Fatigue became expected. Challenges became opportunities to prove their strength rather than reasons to quit. One of the most powerful lessons from Roman discipline is that greatness is rarely built through dramatic moments. It is built through small actions repeated consistently over time. Every march strengthened endurance. Every drill sharpened focus. Every difficult task prepared soldiers for greater challenges ahead. The empire was not defended by sudden bursts of inspiration. It was defended by men who committed themselves to daily improvement. While others searched for shortcuts, Rome mastered the power of consistency. There were moments when Roman soldiers wanted to stop, moments when exhaustion overwhelmed them and defeat seemed close. But discipline taught them to keep moving forward regardless of emotion. They learned that the body often gives up long before the mind truly reaches its limit. By pushing through hardship repeatedly, they discovered strength they never knew existed within them. That is why disciplined people often achieve what others believe is impossible. They continue forward after everyone else has already surrendered. The legacy of Roman discipline still speaks across history because its principles remain timeless. Success in any battle, whether on ancient fields or in modern life, depends on the ability to remain focused when distractions appear, committed when obstacles arise, determined when progress feels slow. Rome proved that discipline can transform ordinary individuals into forces capable of changing the world, not through talent alone, not through luck, but through the relentless decision to show up, endure hardship, and continue moving forward no matter how difficult the path becomes. Fear was never absent from the Roman battlefield. It lived in every soldier standing behind a shield, hearing the thunder of approaching footsteps grow louder with every passing second. Before the clash of steel, before the war cries echoed across the valley, there was silence inside the mind of a man preparing to face death. Even the strongest warriors felt it. Their hearts raced, their hands tightened around their weapons. Their thoughts drifted toward the possibility that they might never see home again. But courage was never about removing fear from the human soul. Courage was about refusing to let fear decide your action. The legends of Rome often make soldiers appear fearless, as though they marched into battle without hesitation or doubt. But real courage is far more human than the stories suggest. Roman soldiers were ordinary men forced into extremes. Many were young recruits who had never witnessed the horrors of war before. They did not step onto the battlefield because they felt invincible. They stepped forward because duty demanded it. They learned that fear could exist inside them while they still continued to fight. That realization changed everything. When thousands of enemy warriors charged toward the Roman lines, instinct told the body to run. Every human being carries the natural desire to survive. The sound of screaming men, crashing shields, and sharpened blades tearing through the air could break the spirit of anyone unprepared. Yet Roman soldiers trained themselves to stand firm against that instinct. They locked their shields together and held the line even when terror spread through their minds. Their courage came from action, not emotion. They understood that bravery is not a feeling that magically appears. It is a choice made in moments of fear. Roman commanders knew fear could destroy an army faster than any enemy attack. Panic spreads quickly among men who lose control of their emotions. That is why discipline and training became essential. Soldiers repeated combat drills endlessly so their bodies would react automatically under pressure. In the middle of chaos, they relied on training to overcome hesitation. Fear may have screamed inside their minds, but their actions remained steady because preparation gave them confidence. Courage was built long before a battle ever began. Many soldiers discovered that fear changes once the battle starts. Before combat, the mind imagines endless possibilities of pain and death. But when the fighting begins, survival demands focus. Roman warriors learned to concentrate on the man beside them, the shield in front of them, and the command shouted across the battlefield. Courage came from narrowing the mind to the present moment. They stopped thinking about the entire war and focused only on the next step forward. One movement, one command, one strike at a time. The strongest Roman soldiers were not always the biggest or most aggressive men. Often, true courage appeared in the quiet soldier who continued standing despite exhaustion and terror. Courage revealed itself in men who protected their brothers during battle, even while fearing for their own lives. It appeared in soldiers who refused to abandon their position while arrows rained from the sky. These moments were rarely glorious. They were painful, terrifying, and deeply human. Yet they became the foundation of Rome's victories. Fear also taught Roman soldiers humility. No matter how experienced a warrior became, the battlefield remained unpredictable. Every soldier understood that death could arrive suddenly, without warning. That understanding forced them to respect preparation and remain mentally sharp. Overconfidence could lead to destruction. Courage did not mean believing you could never fail. It meant accepting the risk while moving forward anyway. Roman soldiers carried that truth with them into every battle they faced. There were times when Roman armies suffered devastating losses. Entire formations collapsed under pressure. Men watched friends fall beside them in brutal combat. In those moments, courage became even more difficult. Continuing to fight after witnessing fear become reality required immense mental strength. Yet many soldiers discovered that courage grows stronger when tested repeatedly. Each hardship forced them to confront fear directly rather than avoid it. Over time, they became less controlled by panic because they learned they could survive experiences they once believed impossible. One of the greatest truths about courage is that it inspires others. Cool. On the battlefield, when one Roman soldier stood firm instead of retreating, the men beside him often found strength within themselves. Fear spreads quickly, but courage can spread just as powerfully. A single act of bravery could hold an entire line together during the darkest moments of battle. That is why Roman armies valued unity so deeply. Soldiers drew strength not only from themselves, but from the unwavering determination of the men around them. The Roman army understood that courage was not reserved for heroes written about in history books. It belonged to ordinary individuals who made the decision to move forward despite fear pressing heavily against their minds. Every battle tested that decision again and again. Every march toward danger demanded it. And every soldier who continued advancing while fear whispered for him to stop proved that true courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph of will over it. Victory in the Roman army was never measured by how fast a battle began, but by how long a soldier could endure when everything around him was collapsing. On the battlefield, strength alone was never enough. Skill alone was never enough. Even courage alone was not enough. What truly decided the outcome of war was endurance, the ability to remain standing when exhaustion, fear, and chaos all demanded surrender at the same time. Before a battle even started, Roman soldiers already carried the weight of endurance on their shoulders. They marched for miles in full armor across rough terrain under burning sun or freezing winds. By the time they reached the battlefield, their bodies were already tested. This was not weakness in the system, it was preparation for reality. Rome knew that the enemy would not wait for comfort or fairness, so soldiers were trained to continue moving forward, even when their legs burned and their muscles screamed for rest. Endurance began long before the enemy appeared on the horizon. When the clash of armies finally began, endurance became the silent force that separated survival from collapse. The first few moments of battle were always intense, shouting, charging, weapons striking shields, and dust filling the air. But the real test came after that initial chaos. When adrenaline faded and exhaustion began to set in, many warriors lost their strength. Their arms grew heavy, their breathing became strained. Their minds started to slow. In that moment, the Roman soldier who had trained for endurance did not stop. He continued moving, even when every instinct told him to rest. Roman commanders understood that battles were not always won by immediate dominance, but by outlasting the enemy. Many opposing armies fought with explosive aggression at the beginning, only to fade as fatigue took over. The Roman approach was different. They trained for sustained pressure. Their formations were built to hold ground for long periods. Every soldier knew that his role was not just to fight, but to survive longer than whoever stood across him. Endurance turned Roman legions into an unbreakable wall that slowly pushed enemies backward over time. There is a moment in every battle when fear and exhaustion meet. It is the point where the body no longer feels strong and the mind begins to question every decision. This is where most armies break. But Roman soldiers were trained specifically for this moment. They had already experienced exhaustion in training, already felt pain in practice, already learned what it meant to continue when the body wanted to quit. Because of this preparation, they could recognize that the feeling of weakness was temporary, not final. Endurance was not just physical, it was psychological resistance against surrender. Even in the middle of battle, endurance was tested in countless small ways. Holding a shield for too long, standing in formation without breaking rank, continuing to advance step by step through resistance. Each action required energy that slowly drained away, yet stopping was never an option. Roman soldiers learned to manage their strength carefully, to conserve energy for the moments that mattered most. They understood that survival often depended on who could still move after everyone else had already collapsed from exhaustion. The battlefield itself became an enemy of endurance. Heat, dust, blood, noise, and confusion all worked together to wear down even the strongest warriors. Visibility would drop as smoke filled the air. Communication would become harder as voices were lost in the chaos. Under such conditions, the body and mind were constantly strained. Yet, Roman soldiers were trained to function even when everything around them felt overwhelming. Endurance meant continuing to act with discipline even when the environment itself felt unbearable. Over time, endurance created a mental shift in Romans. They no longer viewed fatigue as a signal to stop, but as a signal to push further. Pain was no longer feared, it was expected. Exhaustion was no longer a warning, it was part of the process. This mindset allowed them to operate beyond what most people would consider their limit. While others would collapse under pressure, Roman soldiers treated endurance as a skill that could be expanded through repetition and willpower. There were battles where victory was not achieved through sudden breakthroughs, but through slow, relentless pressure. Roman soldiers would hold their positions for hours, refusing to give ground while the enemy slowly weakened. Even if progress seemed invisible in the moment, endurance ensured that the outcome would eventually shift. The army that could last longer always gained the advantage. In this way, endurance became a strategy as powerful as any weapon or formation. The true power of endurance lies in its invisibility during the struggle. It does not appear dramatic like courage or loud like aggression. Instead, it works quietly, moment by moment, as soldiers continue to stand when everything inside them is telling them to fall. Roman armies proved that battles are often decided not by who strikes first or hardest, but by who remains after everything else has faded away. Greatness in the Roman world was never treated as something accidental or gifted to a chosen few. It was understood as something forged slowly through struggle, repetition, and sacrifice. A Roman soldier did not wake up one day. He was shaped through countless days of hardship where every task, no matter how small, contributed to his transformation. Legends were not born in moments of comfort. They were built in the grinding reality of training, discipline, and constant pressure that forced ordinary men to rise beyond what they believed they could endure. The foundation of every Roman soldier's greatness was laid long before he ever saw a battlefield. It began in training camps where expectations were high and forgiveness was rare. Soldiers repeated drills until movement became instinct. They practiced formations until their bodies responded without hesitation. Every mistake was corrected immediately, because Rome understood that even the smallest weakness in training could become a fatal flaw in war. These early struggles were not punishment. They were preparation for a life where failure was not an option. Greatness was also shaped by suffering that could not be avoided. Roman soldiers carried heavy armor and marched long distances regardless of weather or exhaustion. Their bodies were constantly tested against physical limits. Blisters, pain, and fatigue were common companions. Yet instead of being seen as obstacles, these hardships were viewed as necessary steps in becoming something greater. Each challenge endured became part of their identity. Over time, suffering stopped being something feared and started becoming something accepted as part of the path towards strength. The Roman system ensured that no soldier could rely on talent alone. Natural ability meant nothing without discipline. A strong body was useless without control. Even the most skilled fighter had to submit to structure and order. This reality forced every soldier to understand that greatness required constant effort. There was no final stage where training ended. Improvement was continuous. Every day demanded focus, and every mistake demanded correction. Greatness was not a destination. It was a process that never stopped. What made Roman greatness unique was its connection to teamwork. A soldier was never judged only by his individual strength, but by how well he functioned within the formation. One man's failure could weaken the entire line. Because of this, soldiers learned to trust each other completely. They understood that their survival depended on unity. This created a powerful bond where every individual was responsible not just for himself, but for the men standing beside him. Greatness, therefore, was not selfish, it was shared. Even mental strength played a crucial role in shaping Roman greatness. Soldiers were constantly pushed into uncomfortable situations where doubt and exhaustion were unavoidable. They were taught to continue acting even when confidence disappeared. This mental conditioning was just as important as physical training. Over time, soldiers learned that feelings could not control action. Fear, fatigue, and uncertainty were acknowledged but not obeyed. This separation between emotion and action became one of the strongest foundations of Roman discipline. Greatness was also built through repetition of failure. Roman soldiers did not become strong by avoiding mistakes, but by learning from them. Every error in training was an opportunity to improve. Every weakness was identified and corrected immediately. This constant cycle of refinement ensured that improvement was continuous. Instead of breaking under pressure, soldiers adapted. They learned that failure was not the end of progress, but part of the path toward mastery. The environment itself contributed to shaping greatness. Roman training did not happen in comfort. It happened in harsh conditions where soldiers had to adapt to discomfort as a normal part of life. Whether it was extreme heat, cold, hunger, or exhaustion, they learned to function regardless of circumstances. This ability to operate under pressure became essential on the battlefield, where conditions were unpredictable and often brutal. Greatness was not about avoiding hardship, but becoming capable within it. Over time, soldiers began to internalize the idea that greatness was not something given, but something earned repeatedly. It was not enough to be strong once or brave once. Every moment required proof of discipline and resilience. This constant demand for effort shaped their identity. They no longer saw themselves as ordinary men. They saw themselves as part of something larger, something built on sacrifice and relentless commitment to improvement. The legacy of Roman greatness lies in its simplicity and its difficulty at the same time. It is simple because it is built on repetition, discipline, and endurance. It is difficult because it requires a person to keep going long after comfort has ended and motivation has disappeared. Roman soldiers demonstrated that greatness is not defined by talent or circumstance, but by the willingness to continue shaping oneself through every challenge faced along the way.